Hi everyone, it's Jen. Welcome to the 41st Automation Hour. And make sure, okay. So logistics-wise, if you're attending for the first time, all lines are muted. Please use the chat function to ask questions about Cheryl's presentation or any general process automation questions. And if we don't get to your question in today's session, please continue on with that discussion in our Trailblazer community Salesforce Automation Hour. We will post the recording as well as the deck after the session. And you can also reach us at automationhour.com. Okay. And for our upcoming sessions, we have 4 more scheduled. We are in the process of scheduling out the rest of the year, so you still have time. If you have a cool use case and a process automation solution for that you'd like to present at this forum, do reach out to me on the Trailblazer community or DM me on Twitter at my handle, Jen W. Lee. Want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io, for bringing us this awesome forum. And here are your hosts, David Litton, myself, and Rakesh. And with that, we're very excited to have Cheryl Feldman on today, and she's going to talk about a really cool topic that's near and dear to my heart, custom metadata types with Flow. So without further ado, let me change it over to Cheryl. Should be all yours, Cheryl.
Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, hi everyone. I am Cheryl Feldman. I'm super excited to be here on Automation Hour. I have attended myself many times and listened to some of the replays and have gotten a lot of help. So thank you everybody and the hosts for having me. I really appreciate it. So if you don't know me, my name is Cheryl Feldman. I'm based in New York City, and I've been a Salesforce MVP for a little over 4 years now. I co-lead the New York City Salesforce user group, and I originally started both the New York City Women in Tech user group and the Financial Services user group, where now I act as an advisor to both of those. And speaking of New York, shameless plug, the New York City World Tour is coming up next week, and I'll be presenting twice. First is on the WIT Breakfast panel. I'll be a panel member, and then I'm also going to be in a session, I believe it's going to be Developer Forest at 12 p.m. on scaling your validation rules, and that'll also be something on custom metadata types on how to use them with validation rules. So some other fun facts is I actually share a birthday with Trailhead. I'm a proud owner of a golden hoodie, and I reside, as I mentioned, in New York City, and I'm also on the right side of your login screen sometimes, so you may recognize me from there. And my Twitter is at Cheryl Feldman, and I'd love your feedback on this presentation. So if you have questions afterwards, or if you're watching the replay of this, I would love to hear from you. So what are we going to talk about today? What I'm going to do, because a lot of times when I interact with admins, and this was probably me about 1.5 years ago, I didn't know what a custom metadata type was, and I was scared to even look at them because they were under the, the coding section of Salesforce, and I'm like, I'm an admin, I don't go over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk everybody through what a custom metadata type is and why they're important and why you should know about them. And we'll actually look at a couple of the custom metadata type records I put in, and then I'm going to show you some actual use cases I have set up in a dev org around using metadata types with Flow, where I'm housing some address information like zip code, city and state, and how we can actually use that in quick actions and to automate some things for our users. And we'll also talk about a couple of other use cases that I've used in real life. And then I'm happy to stay on and do a Q&A. So let's talk about what a custom metadata type is, and we'll show you one. I'll show you where to find it. Custom metadata types are essentially objects you can deploy, but you're storing your records as metadata instead of data. So when you enter a record in a custom metadata type object, it's not storing it in the back end as a record like you would, like maybe for accounts or contacts. You're storing it as actual metadata like you would like a field or something like that. Which, what does that mean? That means you can deploy them. And I know a lot of you may have objects that you use as reference, and all they are, they're maybe used as reference in automation or Apex, maybe Flow, maybe even validation rules with a VLOOKUP. You can actually use custom metadata types for a lot of those things, because the challenge we have with objects is that the data does not deploy, and it also does not copy over when you refresh a sandbox. So if you only don't have maybe a full sandbox, you only have a partial sandbox, and you're housing just a regular object, a custom object to store some reference data, every time you refresh your sandbox or create a new sandbox, or you want to deploy, maybe you've built this out in a sandbox and you want everything to come over to production, it requires an additional step, not just a regular deployment. It requires a data load. Custom metadata types take care of this, and we'll actually go through how to manage them and create one. It's actually very, very, very easy. So don't be scared of custom metadata types. Yes, they are. If you're in Lightning, they're under the custom code section. I believe in Classic, they're under the developer section. If you just type custom metadata types in your quick search, you'll find them. This is what they look like. They will look familiar. When you're looking at the right side of the screen here, and we'll actually really look at one, this is right from my dev org. What does this look like? It looks like a custom object. And that's essentially really how it behaves. The only difference is how your records are actually stored. So let's talk a little bit about why they're important. This is a slide I show really often when I present on this topic. I think a lot of us as admins and developers, we want to be doing things that we have listed here above the iceberg. We want to be building cool features that bring value to users, and we want to migrate to Lightning. We want to do all these cool things, but we're bogged down with maintaining references and logic, maybe updating code when configuration changes, or simple changes that impact code, or simple changes that impact your validation rules or your flows. So maintaining hard-coded things. So I think using things like metadata types gets us away from staying below the iceberg so we can stay above the iceberg. And I think it's really helpful to admins and developers to be doing things that really add value to your business rather than sitting there and maintaining things. Because who wants to, every single time, let's say you have a specific, like maybe an object, or maybe you're hard coding, like, I don't know, sales tax or something in a formula field. And every time they changes, sitting there and going and updating everything, where in all these different places, but you could be maintaining it in one place in something like custom metadata types. And the example we'll go through today is around zip codes, because I think everybody can kind of relate to that. So I'm actually going to go through a demo. So bear with me 1 second here. Okay. So let's actually, I'm actually going to show you how this works, and then I'm actually going to show you the custom metadata type behind it, how it interacts with Flow, and how to actually set up the quick action. So if you see, this is just a contact record, and you'll see that I'm on the details section on the page, and you'll see the address information is blank. So what I've done is I've created this address update action. So if I type in a zip code, and let's see, this I'm actually pulling back data. So what I'm doing in my custom metadata type, and I'll show you how this works, I'm storing zip code, city, and state information, and then I'm just displaying it on a screen. So this is actually a flow screen. And then I'm going to enter the street address. So let's say it's at, 111 Main Street. And I click next. If I come down here, now the address has been updated. So what's really cool about this, if we actually look at, if I come into setup, And all I have to do is, if I just start typing metadata types, if I click here, this is what they look like. So I have this zip lookup object, but what I've actually noticed today, and I didn't notice this before, is these actually show now in your object manager. I hadn't noticed that before, so that may be something new or something maybe I just didn't notice that before, so I thought that was pretty cool. So when you're actually managing a custom metadata type, you enter your data or really your metadata on the back end a little bit differently. So let's actually take a look at this custom metadata type. So what I'm doing here is I just created 3 fields for city, state, and zip code. And what I'm doing is the user is entering the zip code on the back end, and I'll show you my flow. I'm actually using that zip code that the user enters as a reference to do a lookup against the metadata type and display the city and the state. So if you think about this, if you were to there's actually a tool out there on GitHub you can use to mass insert a bunch of metadata type records for all the zip codes and the states. You could save your users a lot of time with entry on making sure that you're validating and making sure when they enter a zip code and the city and state populate right back. Without having to have people manual entry, without having to use state and country pick lists, which sometimes don't work for everybody. This is another way around that. You can also create all different types of fields on here. This is just a very simplistic version to give you an idea of what you can do. So if you wanted to add like another one, maybe like you wanted to have maybe some sort of like geolocation field, or maybe you wanted to have county or something on here, something that you could put back in here. And really the information that's going to go in your custom metadata type is information that doesn't change. Really our zip codes, cities and states really don't change. Maybe you want to add country or something like that. So those would be things you'd want to keep on your custom metadata type. And then things that would be different per each, maybe your contact or your account records, such as your address information. When I say that, your like street address, or maybe like your apartment numbers or things like that, those are things you'd want your user to enter that are going to be different for every single record. So let's say we want to do that. So let's say we want to add a text field. And let's say I wanted to have this as county. Very similar to adding another one. Let's make this like 100 characters. And then you can have different page layouts too. I'm just housing one here. And then here, that's how you manage it. Now, with managing your records, it's a little bit different. So let's come back here. And you can actually see all the information here as well. If I come back to the metadata types, you'll see that you have this manage records. And this is where you're actually going to, if you're manually inputting records, this is how you're going to do it. So I just have 3 here, but if we wanted to create another one, so you create a name for it. So I'm going to call this like, call it. And then let's say the zip code is, and then the city would be New York City. The state would be New York. And let's say if I wanted to enter a county, which would also be New York, but if I had a better example, let me do another example. So we're not having the same thing. So 10562, the city, that would be Tarrytown, New York, Westchester County, right? So if we had information like that, that's what you would store here. This information doesn't change. You're just using it for reference. And again, you can use this in your Apex, in your automation, such as Flow, or to actually validate data if you want to actually, use in a validation role. And that's actually in pilot right now. So if I think it may be going GA in the next release, but don't quote me on that. I'm not a product manager or anything, but I do actually have it in one of my other dev orgs, and it's actually really cool. So if we have something like that, that's all how you set up a custom metadata type record. So let's actually look at my flow. And then that's probably what you're most curious on how this is actually working. And I have this city lookup flow. And I'm just going to open this up. Okay. So this is what my flow looks like. And my boxes here, or my little steps here, are always crooked, always. But this is what I actually have here. So I have my first screen. So if we click here, so this is just my city lookup screen. So all I'm doing here is I just have the zip code field. This is what I want the user. And then what I'm doing is, this is, storing on the back end, because this is a screen input field. And that's all it is, where a user will enter the zip code. And then here I have my record lookup. And what I'm doing here is I'm looking up the zip code in the custom metadata type object. And so you can actually find this. So instead of like having account and contact, you can actually look up against a custom metadata type object. And so what I'm doing is I'm looking up zip code equals the zip code in the custom metadata type object. And then I'm bringing back city and state. And I'm putting those in variables. And so I've got the city that's going to come back, and this is the city that's stored on the custom metadata type. This is the state that's stored on the custom metadata type. And I'm storing them in a variable for city and a variable for state. And then what I'm doing on my output screen is I just have an input field here for street address. And then I have a variable for city, variable for state, and then I'm showing my zip code field again, just, even though a user already entered it, I'm just showing it here for display. And so these are display fields that will display the variable for city, and the variable for state will display based on lookup. Now, I didn't add anything fancy here, like if there's a failure, or if there's, no match. I didn't, go through that. I didn't make it that, that complex here, but those are things that you can do, is maybe display another screen if there isn't a match where, maybe we can allow the user to enter all of those things. And then the last piece of this is the record update. So what I'm doing is, you'll see I have another variable that's called record ID. It's really important if you want to use a flow in a object action, or I believe as one of the flow components in App Builder, that you're storing the ID not in some, you can type in like var record ID, that you use this exact format. Otherwise, it won't work. That's actually something that I found. And then when I actually found, Jen had actually sent me her blog. And when I was like, oh, that's what I needed to do. And that was because I was storing it as like var record ID. And that's the mistake that I was making. And so what I'm doing here is I'm looking up for finding the contact, which is essentially the contact I'm on, that I'm clicking that address update action on, and I'm just passing the ID into this variable. And then the mailing city is going to be my city variable, the zip code, state, and then the address is the address that the person is actually entering. So again, the variable is going to be, the city is going to be a variable that we're looking up. The zip code is the zip code that the person enters in the first screen. The state is coming back up from the lookup, and then the street address is on the last screen that the user's entering, and we're going to update all the contact information. Some other things you could do if you really wanted to, get really fancy, if maybe there was already an address in the contact, you could display that and, you know, do some sort of other update. So there's a lot of things you can do, but this is really what I wanted to show you is the power of this and what you can do and how they work as objects, just to give you some ideas on, you know, things you can do. Other ways I've seen this used is around, you know, maybe housing sales tax or discount information, and things like that. I'm actually doing some stuff in my org. I'm actually, you know, doing some stuff for Lightning in a sandbox right now, and I'm housing some information about some of our product data in a metadata type, and I'm using that in an action to make things a little bit easier, you know, for my users with Flow. So that's what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And then I'm going to show you what the action looks like. So if we come into Object Manager, I'm just going to find my contact object. And then if I go into buttons, links, and actions, this is my address update action. You saw and you see it's running a flow. And all you do is when you create this action is you just select, you know, the flow that you want. It's super simple to do. And I can actually show you how that works really quickly. But it only works with screen flows. It doesn't work with your other types of flow you use kind of behind the scenes in Process Builder or other pieces of automation. It's got to be a screen flow, at least for right now. But if I wanted to create another one of these really quick, if I just come back to button links and actions and I clicked on new action, here in the action type, this is where you would select flow. The city lookup is the only screen flow I have in this dev org right now, so that's the only one that shows up here. But you would select your flow if you had more than one, and then create your label, and then save it, and then you would just add it to your page layout. But that's how that works, and I'll show you again on another contact on how this runs. So let's come here to another contact. Again, I'm going to click on the address update. I'm going to type in a zip code. Let's do the one I just did. And then if I wanted to say, let's say, and I come into details, this will be updated. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions and around custom metadata types, around how this flow works, other ways to use it, and any other questions that you might have. And hopefully this demo and this information made sense.
Okay, so Jeremy's question is, can you show how you brought up the flow to enter the zip code? Okay, you did that. You just said that. Jamie says, seems like you could use this for lead routing if you need to do so by zip code or county.
You know, that's actually a really good point. You actually probably could, because if your rules aren't changing very much, and if you wanted, so let's actually go through how you might create a custom metadata type to store that information, because I think that would actually be helpful. I think a lot of other people can actually probably benefit from that. So if you wanted to store rules for like lead routing or case routing, let's actually come. We won't go through the whole flow today, but that's actually a really good use case, is if you created a new custom metadata type, maybe for like lead rules, lead rules, say, right? And then if you had maybe something like, let me just get, you had your zip code, say this is 5, and then maybe you did something like this. And, and I think this would help you get around that if you want to do routing on another object, and maybe you are, and I think my screen just froze, I apologize. If you wanted to do something around, let me just try to quick refresh here. If you wanted to do something around like having a zip code and then having like housing a user ID, what I don't think you can do right now, which do not quote me on this. We'd have to, talk to the product manager, but I believe I did talk to them at one point, is that doing a lookup to overall objects. You can do lookups to other metadata types right now, other metadata type objects, but you can't look up necessarily to like the user or queue, which I think is one thing that is missing from this. But you could have a field for like IDs for your user or queue, and then you could do it that way and house it this way, and then it would always deploy. But you just have to, your user IDs and things like that may be different from production to sandbox and things like that. So that's something to be wary of, but that is a good use case that you could definitely do.
All right, and for those who have posted the question looking for the tool on GitHub, I did post that out on the chat, so everyone should have that, that URL. Okay, so I'm just going to read through to see if there are other questions other than accessing the tool. Robin says, this is amazing information. I'm not sure as a new admin that I'm understanding the why behind this.
Okay, so I think the why behind this is, so if I were to create a regular object, right? So let's say I created a regular object to house my zip code information, which I felt like I've had to actually do this use case so many times in my career, and I would house this in a custom object. The challenge with custom objects is if you refresh your sandbox and it's not a full sandbox, or let's say you're building something based on validation rules, or you're building this around like automation, and you're building this in a sandbox, those records that you created in this object to validate your data or to automate your data will not push over in your deployment. You would actually have to maintain them and load them every single time you move from org to org. And there's a lot of limitations with custom objects, and then you're using up your data storage. And I mean, think about all the zip codes and cities and states in the world, and if you wanted to validate that, how many records you might have. So that's something to think about. So I think those are their main use cases. So you can kind of keep everything if you're really maintaining some of the metadata in your setup. Everything's deployable and can kind of move with you in your development process.
All right, another question is, what are a few scenarios where we might find custom metadata types to be useful?
Yeah, so I think a couple of other scenarios beyond automation is it's a great way for developers and admins to interact with each other. So let's say you have let's talk about components. We're all moving to Lightning App Builder. Let's say you have a custom component that has a whole bunch of stuff on it, right? And you only, for a specific group of users, you only want to house these 5 things or these 7 things. You could make each one of those things essentially a field or a checkbox within a metadata type, and your developer can reference the custom metadata type in their code within the Lightning component, or you can do this in Apex or Visualforce. And that way, every time you need to change to your code, you're not bothering your developer, you're updating your metadata type. And that's what I use metadata types the most for that, where I essentially have built myself with my developer admin control panels for custom pages, custom searches, for definitely some automation, and also around components. I work a lot with Lightning components for mobile, and we built one overall mobile app that can have a total of 10 components on it, but we make each one visible based on what's actually selected on the metadata type for that group of users.
Okay, there's a question here. I'm wondering if there is a link to a zip code metadata type object in GitHub.
That I don't know, but we can ask.
Okay. Next question. Could this flow be invoked via an import? So be able to do this lookup when importing data instead of singularly via a button/screen.
Oh, so you mean like if you import like a bunch of leads or contacts or other records that if they don't have address information and maybe have a zip code, like in this case, to go and do that lookup? I think you could. I think you need to, make sure your stuff is bulkified and everything, but I don't see why you couldn't do that. Jen, do you see any reason why you couldn't do that?
Not that I'm aware of,
Yeah.
but I've not tried.
Yeah, I haven't tried it, but I mean, I'm actually using that as far as Apex goes. So I'm going to say mostly yes. But, as far as like flow, I think we would need to check. But I know in Apex, I do this all the time.
So another question here, what are other places an admin can use custom metadata types except flow and validation rules? Currently, that's the only place for admins to be able to use it, but I know they're looking at extending it to process builder, formulas, and other things as well. So that's a forward-looking statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, really, if you're working with developers, using custom metadata types are key to making your development scalable. So if we think back to that iceberg, right? Every time, let's say, you have a new sales team and you want a page to look differently, and you're using like custom components or something, or right now you're in Visualforce, you're not, using Lightning components. Having to bother your developer every time you do a change, it's very time consuming. It takes away from the things that you really want to do, but these are things you need to maintain. So it keeps you out of maintenance mode and your developers more in development mode. So if you're working with developers, I think that, definitely send them documentation on custom metadata types on, and even in Apex for automation, it's really powerful.
All right, another question here is, can you use the flow interface in the Salesforce mobile app?
Yes. So you can, and that's actually fairly new. So these actions that I showed you I created are available on mobile as well. So these do work, and that's actually my use case, and I'm actually doing some stuff at work right now. So yes, they do work on mobile. And they do reference the metadata types and things like that. So, and that's pretty new. The flows with quick actions. I mean, Jen, would you say that was like winter of this year or technically last year? I think that's pretty new.
It's pretty new, yes.
Yeah.
Did you run into any metadata type limitations when solving this use case?
This use case, no. I have run into some metadata type limitations. And I think the big one is I had come up with this design, not too much like lead assignment, but essentially reassigning and assigning records. And I think the big thing we're missing is the link between custom metadata type objects to your regular objects where you could reference those kind of objects and then, form some sort of automation there without having to house record IDs. I think that would be really, really powerful. But yeah, as far as this use case, I did not run into any limitations.
All right. I think I've run through all the questions we have so far, so I'll give folks a couple of minutes. If you have another custom metadata type question, or if you have a general process automation question. Is there a trail on this on Trailhead? So there is a custom metadata type module on Trailhead. It's really focused more on the development side of things, not on how admins can use it. But there is one out there. Randy's question is, can you look up a metadata object field from another metadata object field?
Yes, that you can do. So if I actually come back to our metadata type, so if let me go back into setup here. If I'm looking at this specific one, and then I go ahead and create a new field, you can actually create a relationship between two metadata type objects.
I'm interested in automating a permission sets to new users.
I think Jen has a blog on that.
I do. So my blog on automating permission set assignments or removals does not actually have anything to do with a custom metadata type. I use the API name for the perm set in a process builder, and then you invoke flow. But I do have a blog post on that. If you go to jenwlee.wordpress.com, you'll be able to find that out there.
Yeah.
Some other use cases that I've used custom metadata type for is, for example, I might want to, like, let's say certain people and roles need to be added to a public group, and we want to be able to automate that, the addition and removal. I've used custom metadata types to do the mapping of the role and what public group API names that they're associated to, and then in my flow, using Process Builder and Flow, I will do that, that association. So that's another use case.
And I think one thing I wanted to mention is the difference between permission sets and metadata types, because they're kind of similar. In some ways, you can use them similarly. And so I think it's the list custom setting that you probably want to use metadata types for. If you have, sorry, I didn't mean permission sets. I meant custom settings. Sorry, it's been a long week. So if you have custom settings that are hierarchy custom settings, where you have an overall setting for your org, and then you say this profile does this, this user does that. That you cannot do with custom metadata types right now. And I think having that lookup to users and profiles and standard, objects and custom objects, that would solve that problem. And I've let the product manager know that he should do that. So he ends up listening to this. Hopefully that comes as a reminder of things that I think will be really useful. But that's something I wanted to mention also if you are a big user of custom settings.
All right, anyone else have questions? Type them in now. What is another awesome time saver that a flow has solved for you?
So I do a lot around, I actually pull down some information into opportunity contact roles. And I also push information back up to the opportunity from contact roles for some reporting purposes. I use Flow for that. I also use it behind Process Builder to create some automated follow-ups for my users. So we have some business processes that were very manual around, when we have meetings and we do certain types of contacts when we want to have a follow-up. So we actually automate that whole thing now using Process Builder and Flow, which essentially creates the follow-up on the back end based on different things that happen. So if they have, meeting type X with our customers, then a certain type of follow-up gets created. If they have a different type of meeting, another type of follow-up gets created, and they can actually mark different things on their meetings to actually have different types of follow-ups generated on the back end. So that's something that I've used a lot for Flow. Trying to think of some other ones. I'm actually testing a lot of stuff with mobile right now. I think we can probably deprecate some of our old Visualforce that we have on mobile, where my users are very, very, very heavy into mobile. So I do a lot with Lightning components, and I'm trying not to have to build more Lightning components. With mobile right now, so because I need my developers working on some other stuff. So I've actually been trying out using some flow with actions, and also within like app pages on App Builder, and I've been able to do some really cool stuff using flow and displaying appropriate fields at the right time when people need things.
So the next question we're not really going to be able to answer, but I'll just read it anyways. Will there be a Dreamforce session to explain or demo custom metadata types versus custom settings? I mean, it does sound like a good idea, but we don't have any control over what's presented at Dreamforce. We can definitely put a bug in the ear of the PM, but again, it's up to Salesforce. I do want to say for anybody who is going to Midwest Dreaming, I am going to be presenting on using custom labels, custom settings, custom metadata types, and custom permissions for admins. So I will be covering off on when to use custom settings and when to use custom metadata types if you happen to be going to Midwest Dreaming. All right, another question is, can you please say more about real-time use cases with custom metadata types?
Real-time use cases. Let's see. So I'm using custom metadata types in my org, real-time, real use cases, real deal. I can't go into my org and show you this, but unfortunately without a lot of permissions. But one of the things we actually do is we have a custom search. Our object data model is extremely complex. Reporting, we end up hitting our limits on reporting because of the object model and just of how many objects we have. And to try to teach end users to do that is nearly impossible. So we built a custom search that searches around 30 to 35 objects, where a user can enter information in different fields that search those objects and brings back an actionable list. As an admin, I can actually control. We actually built this into our Visualforce page, which fields are actually shown to that group of users by which metadata type record I have them, that group that we put people in associated to. I also can control what columns are shown on the output and what they can do with those columns. So what we actually do is when it brings back, it's usually going to bring back a list of contacts, a list of leads, and sometimes a list of products. For the contacts and the leads, what they can do is they can go add them to a campaign or to actually export them, or they can add them to this other custom object we have, and they can do it in mass. And I can actually control what they can do from that custom metadata type. Granted, the actual doing the thing isn't controlled by the custom metadata type, it's just making it available to them, because we don't want every user to have access to that, and not every type of user, because we have such a large user base, is going to need access to every single piece of that search. So that's one of the big use cases I use it for. That's actually how I became familiar with custom metadata types when I was about 2 years ago when I was working with a developer on building out this custom search. The other thing I use it a lot for is both in Visualforce and Lightning components, being able to display which groups of people or which pages display what, and I can control that as an admin without having to bother my developer. The other things I use it for, actually I'm helping a nonprofit right now, and one of the things I'm doing with them is they have to track some information on sales tax, on some things that they're selling, and so one of the things that I'm actually doing is I'm putting all the sales tax information in a metadata type and calculating some stuff for them on the back end.
All right, another question is, how do you manage automation requests from users do you have a template you follow?
Sort of, kind of. I think what happens is, let me actually explain what I do because I think that may give some context. So I actually work for a large asset management firm within a large financial services conglomerate. I have a lot of users, a lot of complexity, a lot of data, a lot of everything. So I'm on the business side for all intents and purposes, regardless of titles. You can consider me the product owner for Salesforce, so I sit on the business side. There's a whole technology team. While they're not on the same team as me, I work with them. They are my horsepower behind everything that we need. So what happens is a lot of times I have different meetings with different groups of users, and we kind of talk about what they want to do. And so when automation comes up, I really kind of understand why they want to automate things and what they want to happen when. And a lot of the questions that I try to answer are really through getting to the what's the end result, kind of like how I started and I showed you this address update. What's the end result? What's the end result they want to happen? What do they want to see? And then I back out of that and I write requirements. So we are an agile firm, so I write all my requirements as user stories, meaning like as a salesperson, I want to have a custom button that allows me to quickly update address information. And then I have what they want to update, what it should pull from, where it should pull from. I believe I do have a blog post I'm writing some of this stuff out from a while ago, so I'm happy to show that out.
All right, the next question is, can you use custom metadata type to control a criteria-based list of approvers for an approval process?
That's a great question. I've never tried to do that. Let's look. Jen, you don't happen to know, do you? I'm going to say probably not, but I'm going to say probably not, but
yeah, I'm leaning towards that as well.
Yeah, let me see. Oh, I have an approval process in here. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think you can. See if we can get to it in formulas. No, I don't. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no because it's not available in formulas and process builder. And those are probably the two places. I think maybe when it comes to process builder, you could do stuff like that. I'm trying to think. I mean, maybe if you could do, I've never actually done, Jen would probably know. Can you kick off some sort of approval process from Flow? Because I mean, maybe you could reference it that way and pass some information that way into the approval process. I don't know. I've never actually tried to do it.
We don't really use approval processes here, so I don't really have much experience. I don't know, Rakesh, would you know?
I've triggered it from Flow or Process Builder. The trick from there is really, I think the approval users, that would be the piece that like you probably couldn't work with the custom metadata on. But you could definitely trigger it from Process Builder or Flow based off of record criteria. So you could check and query that, but I think it might come up a little bit short.
All right, anybody else? These have been great questions.
And hopefully everybody found this helpful. And hopefully it makes you, not be so afraid to go into developer things. Because I know I used to be like, oh no, I'm not going there. That's where developers go. Not me.
Why are you guys so great, and where did you get your start in Salesforce?
Is that a question for me? Or is that a question? Because I think all of you are really great. I'll answer that question very quickly, and I'm happy to share. I actually have my story both in a blog and it's on video as well. So I got my start in Salesforce. When I tell you how long I've been doing this, I guess I can't lie and tell people I'm 29 anymore. But so I've been doing Salesforce for a decade and a half. I got started. Actually have a degree in cosmetology. I used to do hair for a living, and I got hurt. ended up getting a job as a secretary. That my first boss taught me how to do analytics and metrics, and I was matching a ton of data from about 8 different systems. And one day in 2004, I walked into his office and said, "Wouldn't it be great? All this stuff was in one system." And he said, "Getting this thing called Salesforce. You should be on the project, and the rest is history." And I think as far as just learning new things, I've been really lucky. And one of the reasons why I like working in large enterprise is I've had a lot of exposure to really, really complicated things. I think you probably get a similar exposure working in consulting as well. And I think I've had the opportunity to work with some really great developers and also really great consulting firms on the customer side with implementations. And I think that's helped me level up my experience. Definitely Trailhead in the past couple of years, great way to learn things that you're not exposed to at work. And I think attending things like this, attending user groups and things like that. That's my answer.
I would agree. I mean, even if you're on the admin side, learn the developer stuff just to increase your knowledge. You might not be the one coding, but at least when you're working with your developers, you're a little more educated.
Yeah, and from my side, I loved podcasts, so like the original Button Click Admin podcast with Jared Miller and Mike. That was my go-to. But it was more just I did a lot in my spare time, always trying to learn and get more knowledge. So Trailhead and other items like that, and a dev org.
All right, last call. We have 8 minutes left. All right, I'm not seeing any more come in. This was a really great session. Robin, we will be posting the slides as well as the recording sometime after the session today, tomorrow. So we'll communicate that out on our website, automationhour.com. We'll also post it out on Salesforce Automation Hour. That's our Trailblazer community, as well as on Twitter. So you'll have that information. With that, I am thank you so much, Cheryl, for being on today. This was great discussion. There's a lot of interest in custom metadata types, and I look forward to folks reaching out after you use custom metadata types with your automation and come back and present. Right. So thank you, Cheryl, very much.
My pleasure.
And thank you, everybody. And this concludes our Automation Hour.
Thank you.